All right, welcome everyone. We'll go ahead and get started. My name is Amy Adams and I am an organizer with Progress Iowa. I use she, her pronouns. And we are very thankful to have you with us today. One of the goals of Progress Iowa is to offer different trainings throughout the year so that we can help you do the best and be the best with your organization or group. I know I see some county chairs in here and some leaders of different organizations. So glad to have you on the call, and hopefully you can take these tools and put them to work right away after the training today. So if you haven't already, go ahead and introduce yourself in the chat if you put your name there and if you're with an organization. This will be recorded, so we will share the recording with you afterwards, and our presenter slides will be shared with you as well. So all of this really great information is meant to be taken, and we want you to be able to put this to use as soon as we're done. If you have any questions while we're going through the presentation or while our presenters are going through the presentation, go ahead and put those in the chat. After they are done presenting, we'll go ahead and have some time for Q&A. You'll notice right now that everybody is muted. Once we finish the presentation portion, folks will be able to come off mute and ask those questions. So if you have questions, go ahead and put those in the chat. I'll be monitoring that. But I am going to go ahead and turn this over to our amazing press secretary, Catherine Kuckelman. Thanks, Catherine.
Thank you, Amy. Hello, everyone. So we're going to start sharing the presentation shortly. There we go. So we can go ahead. This is our interacting with media presentation. So we're going to start with how to write a press release. So first, I was just going to talk about three main press release kind of formats that you probably would use most frequently. Media advisory, a statement, and then a full release. And so we'll go into more detail about what each of those look like. So a media advisory, there's kind of an example on the left there, but it's basically just a way to promote an event. You can send it usually before an event, maybe a day before, and again the morning of, to remind people that it's going on. You'll usually include a short paragraph about what the event is, and then answer, the 5 W's. Who's going to be there, what time, where, whether it's over Zoom or at an actual location. And it's just meant to be short. And so those, like I said, will be sent before an event. Then we'll go to the statement. So these are usually, they can kind of be whatever you want it to be. It's usually attributed to one person from your organization. And usually press will utilize it in a way where they just like grab a chunk of it to use for a story. They usually won't run the whole thing, although sometimes print outlets will take a whole statement, which is cool. It can be a good way to get out something quick after something's happened, to respond to something rather than like writing a whole full release. It's just a quick reaction. And like I said, the formatting is flexible, so it can be super long. It can be 1 or 2 paragraphs. It can kind of be whatever you want it to be. And then we'll look at the full release. So these are usually a longer format. They can include quotes, usually from at least one person, sometimes more. These are where you get more detailed background info, maybe cite where the information's coming from. And like this one, we put in a picture from an event, so press could see there were people there. And then we'll get a little more into detail with that in the next slide. So I'll go over the main components of the release you'll want to include. The first is a catchy title. So this is super important because reporters and press get a lot of emails. And so if you have something interesting or catchy, they're more likely to open it. Some ways you can make it catchy or captivating. I have try alliteration, a question, or a surprising statistic. So some of our examples of alliteration, we had one press release that went out called Corporate Kim Reynolds has cronies deliver cold hard cash. A lot of hard K sound in that one. Or Bobby's behavior is for the birds, referring back to Bobby Kaufman's infamous flipping off at the Capitol. A statistic one we did was 2.5% for Iowa public education is completely inadequate, referring to the funding increases. So that can catch attention. And then the question one we put out was to the governor asking, what if it was one of your grandkids in response to her ban on trans athletes? So those can kind of pique the interest of journalists to open that and read into it. And then the next part is the opening paragraph. So this is where you basically set out what the release is going to cover. It's usually short, 1 or 2 sentences. You're going to answer the 5 W's in there: who, what, where, when, why, and just get all the first info out there. And another thing is, don't repeat what you've said in the headline. If it's too repetitive, that's boring and may turn off someone from continuing to read what's in the release. So we'll go to the next one. So the body, this is the bulk part of the release. This is where you may include your quotes. And these quotes, they can be from different speakers. They can be, if this is after an event's happened, you can pull like quotes directly from the event and put them in there. Then another tip for the body is don't get too technical. Something I read about creating press release is don't just imagine you were explaining this to like a family member or your grandma, someone who just the very basics. So you don't want to get too in the weeds, but you can include background info and stuff at the bottom, just if anyone wants to learn more about where you got the information, where the facts came from. And then you can also include links, links to like a website that may have more information. If it's after an event like a press conference and you recorded it, you can include the recording. A lot of times press may not attend the event right then, but if it's a recorded event, they may use the video later and pull a quote from it. And I think, yep, then we'll go to the last part. Very important, make sure you include contact information. That it should have the person's name, email, and phone number. Usually you want to include all the relevant information in the release so that press doesn't have to contact anyone, but they always may have a follow-up question. They may want to get someone on camera for an interview. So make sure they know who to contact and how to contact them. And then the last part is a boilerplate. This is optional, but it can be a good way to just kind of brand your organization and make sure they know what your group is about. So I put the example of what Progress Iowa's is on there that we put at the bottom of every release, just so people remember who we are, what we do, and how to contact us in the future. And that is all I have. So I will hand it over to our Deputy Press Secretary, James Simmons, to talk about what you do with your release once you have it written.
Hey, James, I think you're muted.
I've been talking completely on mute. Thank you, Ivy. Thank you, Catherine, for kicking it over to me. That little ramble while my mouth was moving was me saying, Catherine's an amazing writer. If anybody has any specific questions about a release or something you're doing, she's a great resource to reach out to for that. And now I'm gonna go back one slide real quick. Maybe. There we go. We're going to learn how to identify and pitch your written materials to reporters across the state. Before we dive into targeting reporters specifically, we're going to take a brief look at the media markets in Iowa. There's this lovely map here on the right side of the screen that was put together by Laura Balin from the Bleeding Heartland. This information shows the 9 different television markets across the state of Iowa, and generally where different print publications fall within these media markets as well. There's a lot of information that we could go through for this, but two things that we should be focusing on is, of the 9 media markets in the state of Iowa, you can see that the orange there in the center and the green, the dark green, are the 2 largest ones. They are also the only 2 in the state of Iowa where I would say over 90% of coverage is focused completely on the state. That is the Des Moines media market, as well as the Waterloo, Cedar Falls, Iowa City market. And those 2 sources, or those 2 media markets in the state of Iowa, is where a lot of original coverage comes for political politics here in the state, as well as events and activists. That's not to say the other 7 markets don't cover Iowa specific events, but they tend to default to the states that they're sharing themselves with. For example, the dark blue at the bottom has Ottumwa in there, but it is also a Missouri focused market because it is the Ottumwa Kirksville, Missouri mixed market. The same thing with that purple down in the southeast corner, Lee County. There's the Quincy Keokuk market, but that is heavily influenced by Illinois politics and media. So breaking it down a little more, political coverage in Iowa comes from those 2 main media markets primarily. So that means stations and outlets in Des Moines, Cedar Rapids, Waterloo. Those places have a much wider reach and a much wider spread that they with their reporting than other reporters do. So people like KCCI in Des Moines, Cynthia Fodder, WHO 13's Dave Price, as well as KWWL in Cedar Rapids, Daniel Peralt, to name a few, are reporters who have some of the widest reach in the state. Skylar Tallwall is actually a fun exception to this rule. She reports out of more of the Ottumwa market, but her work is very heavily used in different outlets across the state. Small papers operate very similarly as well in the state of Iowa. A lot of the small papers get their information from press releases and guest essays from local elected officials and former officials from those communities, but they also get a lot of the reports coming from places like the Des Moines Register or the Cedar Rapids Gazette, their Des Moines Politics Bureau, which means reporters like Ian Richardson, Stephen Gruber Miller, and Brianne Fanelstein in Des Moines, as well as in Cedar Rapids, James Lynch and Aaron Murphy, are 5 of the top sources that if they run a story about your event or about anything, that it's probably going to be picked up by a lot of other organizations and publications across the state. So when we're looking to target reporters, we want to find ones that are in our media market or in our area. If you're holding an event in Scotts County in Davenport and you're trying to get coverage over there, you'd want to go to the Quad Cities market, but probably also as well as like Cedar Rapids and the Waterloo market, because that covers the eastern side of the state. And while you can contact reporters from the far west side of the state, Council Bluffs and Sioux City markets typically don't have the budget or the time to be able to send a reporter all the way across the state. So they will rely on coverage from their sister stations on the eastern side. So knowing that we need to target and like look at reporters in our specific area can actually help save you a lot of time, because then you're not just going through and sending an email to absolutely everybody and trying to have follow-ups with every single person when you can figure out that you need to target just a few specific people. We do have a political reporter guide that our press team has put together. If anybody does not have that already, which it may not have been spread around yet, please let us know, or you can drop that into the chat and we'll be sure to get that spread or sent to you in our follow-up after this. But when you're, to go back, when you are targeting reporters, once you've figured out where your market is and who you're targeting, you can go to our political reporter guide and it'll break it down by print, by radio and television for each of the markets. And that's a great place to start. if you have a personal relationship with a reporter, or a reporter's phone number, cell phone number, or personal email, follow up on those relationships, maintain that open line of communication. That will help you with your events in the future, because then it lets you know that you at least have a stable person to go back to. When you are contacting reporters that you don't have a personal connection with, the best thing you can do is provide as much contact information, like Catherine said, so they have someone to follow up with. They know where to reach out to you if they have questions, but also to keep your message concise but clear. You don't want to have too short of an email that just leaves too much up in the air and they're not exactly sure what you're talking about, but you also don't want to send them an entire novel talking about your event, which is where those media advisories, press releases, and those more concise ways of formatting our information releases are really, really important, because they keep that stuff into one place. Moving past this. So part of what we wanted to share with you all today as well is that these techniques work. Our team has been able to successfully place a lot of different stories around the state, as well as pitch LTEs and op-eds, and we've had a really good success with generating earned media. Earned media is the term that we use to talk about when your name or your organization appears in a news story that you did not apply, like that you did not pay for or advertise for. So when we held the People's Condition of the State event earlier this year in January, leading up to the beginning of session, there were countless stories across the state about those events, and all of those were counted as earned media. So we wanted to share a few of our numbers with you all. Our team has had an earned media hits 222 since the beginning of the year, and those earned media hits have had an advertising value equivalency of $308,000 and $308,098 in the state of Iowa. That number actually is higher if you go national, but we're very proud of the state. And we've also been able to, with these techniques, place op-eds and LTEs, such as for former Lieutenant Governor Patty Judges, into the community newspaper group outlets, as well as current Democratic leader in the Iowa Senate, Senator Zach Walz's Iowans Need a Fair Tax Plan op-ed in the Des Moines Register. And our earned media, as well as the pitched media that we put out there, have appeared in over 80 publications in Iowa and nationwide. And so we know that this contact and that this format is effective. And so with that, I will also throw out that there are ways that our teams can help you too. If you're needing help with press releases and statements, press advisories, pitching to media outlets, digital graphic and design, talking points and reporter follow-ups, all that kind of help is something that we can assist with your organization or your events. Hopefully some of this training today will put you in a position to help yourself as well, but we are always here for additional support. And with that, I'm going to open it up. Or with that, we have finished up the presentation portion of today's training. And so we are going to stop screen sharing here and stop recording.